Hello and welcome to The Ripple Impact, the podcast where we dive into those fascinating small moments, big decisions and unexpected ripples that create waves of change in brands, businesses, leadership and in life. I'm Laura Barber, founder of The Ripple Impact and a global brand strategist who spent over 20 years inside global giants across FMCG, beauty and retail. I now work with founders and brand leaders on strategy, positioning and storytelling, helping leaders turn human stories into brand growth. Each week, I sit down with bold thinkers, founders, and what we call wave maker guests to explore the ripple moments that have shaped their journey and the lessons you can take to transform your own brand and your business. Today on our show, we are joined by award-winning business psychologist and founder of Male Allies UK. Lee Chambers is a leading voice on inclusive leadership, male allyship, and workplace equity. His work has seen him named a UN Women Changemaker, a Marie Claire Future Shaper, alongside Harry Styles and Tom Daley, a Kavli Fellow of the National Academy of Sciences. Lee's been featured in Vogue, The Guardian, and Newsweek, and he brings sharp insights to every conversation on human behaviour, culture, and the future of work. Lee, welcome to the show. It is such a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Yeah, very much looking forward to the conversation, Laura.
Yeah, super excited. We love on The Ripple Impact to start way back at the beginning and learn about the moments that really shape people, that form who they are. And I'd love to go back to those early years, those childhood memories, those moments before you built and scaled a tech business. Take us back to those early years and what were the moments that really shaped you? We call them those ripple impact moments.
It's obviously a pleasure to be able to share elements of my story, Laura. And I think if I think back to those early years, I think there are a number of different factors that play a role in who I am today, the kind of pathways that I've forged, the skills that I've built, and the mission that I'm on. I think firstly, growing up on a council estate in the northwest of England as one of a few black families in a very white town, and, having some adults who really believed in me made a massive difference. My parents were very hard workers. I still remember moments where my dad was working 12-hour shifts, my mum was working 3 different jobs to keep a roof over our head, to keep me and my younger brothers having opportunities. I do reflect on the impact that my head teacher made at primary school when I was facing a lot of racism from a few other kids. And she kind of brought an anti-racist strategy into our primary school in the early 90s, which was just revolutionary at the time. But I didn't realise it until years later when my parents told me what had happened. My school experience just changed. And then as I kind of went through school, that did improve my experience. I was the first one in my extended family to university, which was both a privilege and a lot of pressure. And I did end up dropping out halfway through with some mental health issues before spending some time to gradually work on myself and become a bit more mature, a bit more aware, and equip myself with some tools to manage adversity before managing to re-enroll and graduate. And all that happened before I jumped into a career where I got made redundant very early on and then forged a number of different pathways and probably had 5 careers in 20 years since then.
Wow. Amazing. How incredible for that teacher to create a whole new pathway and a whole new governance around something. She spotted an issue and fixed it. How incredible. How did your parents describe it to you? What did they share with you?
You don't necessarily know what happens behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And that head teacher, Mrs. Smith, actually passed away before I left the school. So she was actually, quite, what I didn't realise is had cancer and was quite close to obviously passing away. Now, by the time I was 16, I was having a conversation with my parents about some of the struggles that I'd had and how things had got better. And they actually told me that she had kind of pulled them into a meeting alongside some other parents, the reverend from the church across the road and some other teachers, to actually explore what could be done to make the school better for, myself and some of the South Asian students that were there as well.
Yeah.
And they'd obviously never told me at the time. And I didn't know all this was happening behind the scenes. But they had pulled in stakeholders from the community to actually think what could be done. And she had actively decided to lead on that. And obviously on reflection now, I do so much work around allyship, thinking about how you can change society's systems, even if they don't directly impact you or you've not directly been impacted by that lack of opportunity or that discrimination or that poor treatment or unfairness. And it's amazing to now think that I almost carry her legacy in the work that I do to this day, because she fundamentally did that for me and I didn't even know it was happening.
Yeah. How incredible to have such amazing allyship right from the off. And gosh, wow, Mrs. Smith, what an amazing legacy that she left behind. And you didn't even know, and weren't even able to speak to her and thank her for it. But what an incredible legacy that she's left. And now you're taking allyship forward, which is so incredible. So take us back to those tech days. So you setting up a business, like scrappy founder. Take us back to those early days with just tenacity to go, I'm going to create a business. What was the idea? How did it start? What was the journey?
Yeah, I mean, and it's fascinating because obviously, entrepreneurship is showcased quite often nowadays as this lovely, glamorized, wonderful world of freedom where you build and
Uh,
construct your own thing, and it's joyous, and you're a trailblazer. And the reality is, it's dirty, gritty, hard work that builds momentum in anything. So I'd obviously, gone back and graduated and managed to get a graduate scheme in finance and banking. And my parents were so proud, obviously coming from those, deep working class roots. They hadn't had professions. They'd had me when they were teenagers. So they'd really tried to live that through me and
mm,
wanted me to have that profession that would showcase to the community what was possible and make them proud. I got that and then got made redundant 18 months later. I mean, they took me to Burns to buy my first work suit, Laura. They were that proud.
oh,
But at the same time, obviously the financial crash happened in '08, and that was the end of all my
mm,
professional qualifications and then my position. So then I was left in a place where I was like, what am I actually going to do? The expectations that I had were suddenly, those pathways were closed. And at first I was a little bit feeling it was all unfair. But I then
yeah.
very quickly realized that, I was 18 months into my career of what's probably realistically going to be a 45 to 50-year career. I can just start again, surely. And I quickly realized that some of the people who'd been training me, who'd been in the industry for 20, 25 years, now couldn't get a job. And
Mm,
they had families and mortgages and they had overheads. So I realized you actually need to be grateful. And it was a quick reframe from that, oh, this isn't fair, to actually, you're just at the start. What can you do? I had to go into work to be able to kind of support my family. So I weren't working in local government, but I found that really frustrating because I wasn't allowed to change anything. And part of that was actually inspiration for thinking, well, how can I build something that, firstly, I have influence over so I can make some change? Secondly, that no matter where the economy goes, I have a level of control over decisions, meaning that we can cut back in a recession or be more strategic or be more resourceful rather than just losing your job and it all having to start again.
yeah.
And there was the fact that I had to move back home and my parents had downsized. So I actually was sleeping in the boiler room at the back of the house that was an awkward shape. So it didn't fit a proper single bed frame in. So I was on a mattress on the floor with a clothes rail down the side. And that was my life at that point. And they quite often say that desperation fuels innovation, right? I wanted something better for myself at that point in my life. So I started my kind of e-commerce business and I just hit that point of digital adoption and it just took off. And all of a sudden I had de facto employees, i.e. all my family. I'd literally turned my parents' house into, it was like a supply chain.
How did they feel about that?
Well, they were roped into it, like they had no choice. But it's really funny because obviously a year later, all of a sudden we have a premises, we've grown a team, and I'm having to pay for my parents to get a new driveway because of the amount of incoming and outgoing deliveries that had rolled up onto
Wow.
the driveway. So there was a material cost to utilising my parents' premises as a business premises for a year. But no, it's obviously such a fascinating time because at this point I'm, mid-20s, suddenly having to employ people with more experience, not really got that much life experience myself, if I'm brutally honest. And yeah, in some ways I reflect back and it's all a blur because it did just go so quickly. You're
Yeah.
evolving constantly, you're building, you're making stuff happen. Like I said earlier, it's not glamorous. It's really
Yeah.
stressful. I take it really seriously as a person because I actually care. And that means that I'm thinking about people's livelihoods, and every decision I make has a ripple effect on everyone in the business, both for the positive and the negative. So yeah, I think that for me there was an aspect of that, but there was the other aspects as well, Laura, that we've spoken about previously around wanting to prove people wrong. There were
Yeah.
lots of people who were like, this young black guy, like no network, no rich
Mm.
uncle. Like, who does he think he is? Like, he's not going to make a success of himself, is he? So I was driven by that kind of the doubt of other people and wanted to prove them wrong. I've been quite transparent. That meant that I didn't reach out for the support and the development that I need. I didn't always listen to feedback as intently as I
Mm.
should have. And some of the decisions were made to showcase that I could be successful rather than think about the more sustainable options that were closer to my own values. So it's a lesson for any first time entrepreneur to really be clear on their own values and self aware of how they're showing up. And just be mindful that being fueled by doubt is very powerful fuel. It will
Yeah.
drive people a long way, but it's not the most sustainable fuel. And it
Um,
will limit your growth as a leader and as a person if all that you are channeling is the negative fuel of showcasing that you can improve into others rather than actually looking how that aligns with your own values and your own version of success. And that has
yeah.
been on a real journey to unpack that over the years.
Wow, what an incredible lesson. Because you said it's such an amazing fuel to go, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'll show you. Watch me. Like it's such a lovely energy that you can bring into yourself. Go, I'm going to prove you wrong, but only if it's positive and if it's serving a need and serving a purpose. And as you said, aligned to the values. So what an incredible lesson. And as you said, no network, no financial backing, just a sense of I've got a vision. I know where I'm going and I'm just going to prove people wrong. Forget the doubters. I know that I've got a passion here and I've got a drive and I'm going to take over my parents' house and a driveway to do it. So amazing. And you were really successful. And then everything changed at age 29, right? Talk us
Yeah.
through what happened and how everything changed within that period of your life.
Yeah, so I mean, before I go into that, Laura, I'll just add an anecdote from someone who I got to know on that business journey, and it was really funny because I never really reflected upon it like this. But what he said
Mm.
is, Lee, one of the reasons why you are successful is because you have nothing to lose. And I didn't have a safety net. I couldn't really fail.
Yeah.
So it was interesting because he said, always fear those who've got nothing to lose. That was his perspective as someone who was quite open about having quite a big safety net should he fail. So it was a fascinating insight into someone else's perspective on it.
Yeah. Wow.
Obviously, I did actually lose something at that point, 5 years in. I actually lost the ability to walk after
Mm.
my immune system failed. And, in deep reflection, when it happened, I was very, very frustrated, upset, and in an awful lot of pain.
Yeah.
Um, and it did happen very, very quickly. Suddenly, I was kind of rushed to hospital, and that was it. I was stuck in hospital then for 6 weeks while they tested me, prodded me, poked me, give me lots of painkillers to try and calm it all down. And yeah, I'll be honest, Laura, at first I was like, why me? Why now? It's not
Yeah.
fair. My son's 18 months old. Wife's going to be giving birth in a few months to my daughter. And I, had great plans of being more present, more active,
Yeah.
supporting other people. And now I'm stuck in this hospital bed. I'm having nurses washing me in the shower, healthcare assistants, helping me eat. Like, what has happened to me? And I had that initial shock and then the initial unhappiness. But I did over time process some of that. It really was helpful writing it down and having a
Right.
support network to just come visit me, even though at times I was out with the clouds on these painkillers, talking nonsense apparently. But yeah, I got to a point where I managed to gradually reframe it towards, well, actually, this is a chance to just stop and reflect, realize what you've not been grateful for, start to
Mm.
think about what really is important, and start to think about the past 5 years that have gone by in a blur. But actually, what can you learn by stopping and
Mm.
looking back and reflecting on what you've built, where you've come from, but also be honest about, where is this taking you maybe away from things that actually you do care about. And even as a 29-year-old man, suddenly losing your physical presence, your independence, your autonomy, your status, things
Yeah.
that feel like they matter, being stripped of all that all of a sudden leaves you holding the mirror up to a much barer version of yourself to
Mm.
actually think what sits behind the facade that's been placed upon you by society's expectations and the things that
Yeah.
you thought were important. So it was a deeply challenging time, but I
Mm.
very quickly realized I had a support network around me, people evolve their lives to help me during that time. And I also kind of hit a space about a month in where I actually committed to being able to do everything I could to get back on my feet. I wasn't
Mm.
going to feel sorry for myself. I wasn't going to sit in the suffering. I was just going to be like, this has happened. There isn't anything I can do to change this particular moment, But what I can do is commit to acting to do everything I can to get back on my feet. That's what I can control. Can't control this has happened. Can't control my immune system being and having decided to do this to my body. Elements of things that I can't control or influence, but what can I control? I can
Yeah.
control as much as I can around optimizing my recovery. And that was really empowering because it allowed me to think about what I could do rather than sat there ruminating on what I couldn't.
Mm.
And obviously, I also, as you well know, had a bit of a bigger vision as well that was going to drive me. And that was being able to take my daughter's first steps with her.
Yeah. Oh, it's such an amazing story. And as you said, you start from a place of such anger and disappointment and why me and, being cross with the world and upset about the situation you're in. But to find the strength personally and also through the support of others to use it as an opportunity to reflect, to learn, to, as you said, when it all gets stripped away, you're at almost your sense of identity and who you are from being a business person that's fully running this business to then being nursed by the carers looking after you is such a seismic shift in situations. But to be able to use that as a moment as pause and reflection and learning is incredible strength for you to be able to do that because that's hard in those moments when you're physically in pain, your body's not doing what you want it to do, you're on a ton of drugs in the recovery phase. It takes a real sense of strength and personal determination to be able to even just pull through that, let alone turn it into something positive and a moment to change who you are. Who was the person that went into the hospital and who was the person that left? Like, how did you change in that time through that reflection moment? Do you feel like you're a different person coming out of that moment to who went in? And how would you describe that?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because I think it's easy to look at this very, very big moment in isolation, but actually, a good chunk of the tools that I used to gradually make that transition, I'd actually built through the time of recovering from those mental health issues when I was 20,
Mm.
were forged when I was made redundant and had to reframe a pathway. Use some of the agility from building a business and that suddenly the landscape's changed and you have to move
Yeah.
and change your expectations and change the goalposts. And even some stuff from my kind of younger life where I was growing up. And I kind of felt that some of those tools that I'd managed to chisel and form were actually really useful in that situation. But you can't see that in the blur
Mm.
of everything at the start when it's all kind of chaotic and feels all out of control. So if anything, I don't necessarily think I grew as that much as a person in the acute phase of it. I actually just managed to get out of that blur and find some of those tools that I'd actually
Yeah.
built when I was younger. And I actually found that as a slightly wiser and older person, I actually had more control over those
Yeah.
tools
Mm.
because I'd firstly used them and practiced them in other situations. And secondly, because all of a sudden I had a very big challenge to start to scale with them.
Yeah.
So I almost took a bit of a challenge mentality rather than this being a threat to the future. Is this a challenge that I can rise to? And that again just helped me kind of take a more proactive approach to that recovery. I would actually say I grew more from the recovery phase than the initial acute moments in
Mm. Mhm.
hospital and the reflection, because I think that recovery phase allowed me to really practice some of these tools. The
Yeah.
truth is, when you're learning to walk again, you fall over an awful lot, and there's a real humility to picking yourself up off the floor or being picked up off the floor again and again. But those little increments, step by step, I'm not the best at celebrating because I want to go out and execute and do things. And I look at big societal problems and I want to change them. But even getting that extra step suddenly was a little thing I could celebrate, a little bit of progress I could measure.
Yeah.
It kind of kept me going, but it also allowed me when I had some setbacks to see how far I'd actually got in the previous month. And I kind of utilized those setbacks to actually realize I still could. It was all part of the process and the journey.
Mm.
And I think coming out the other side, I kind of refer to myself as 70% of the person I was physically. I've never recovered full capability to do all the things that I previously could. Still now, 10 years later, I'm still 70% physically, which I've kept, which actually is the aim rather
Yeah.
than trying to access what I previously had that I've simply not got access to physically
Mm.
anymore. But I say I came out the other side 170% mentally and emotionally the person that I'd went in. So I'd grown significantly mentally, emotionally, even though I had some physical limitations. And that's just a realization of, I suppose, post traumatic growth. I managed
Yeah.
to use that trauma of the situation to grow mentally and emotionally and come out the other side
Mm.
in a very, very different place in terms of what I could actually do, what was possible. but also with a very changing perspective in what was actually meaningful to me, what success actually meant. And yeah, it gave me more capacity to start to explore how I redefine that on my own terms rather
Yeah.
than on society's terms. And that would take some time as well to gradually explore that wider expanse that I suddenly had access to.
Yeah, incredible. I love the two things that really stick out to me are the almost you going through the filing cabinet of experiences and knowledge and learning and recovery and tools and techniques and tricks and knowledge and training and all the things that you cumulatively learned over the years through the recovery and kind of mental health recovery as well to help you get through that. And ultimately having the vision of being able to take your first steps when your daughter takes her first steps. So having that collective knowledge, but having that incredible North Star and that vision of something that you want to achieve to keep you going in those moments. So, wow, what an incredible story. Wow. And your life has shifted again, right, into male allyship. And you talked to me last time about this incredible story of you becoming a parent and then you becoming a stay at home dad and going to these toddler groups and listening and hearing these women talk and this sense of allyship being almost born out of these moments with these women. And I would love for you to tell us that story and how this has completely shifted your trajectory and what you're doing now and how you're helping organizations with allyship. Can you take us back to those moments and what it's meant in terms of the journey you're on now?
Yeah, definitely, Laura. So obviously, kind of ending that last kind of phase that I spoke about, I suddenly had this space to explore like who
Mm,
I was, and I had a wider lens on the world. So suddenly had more scope to explore, and that did leave me as I managed to get back on my feet and take my daughter's first steps with her, which is the proudest moment of my life to this day, despite accolades and all the kind of things I've been recognised for. It connected me to myself more and really helped me appreciate the bond that I had with my children. Because, funnily enough, the illness made me more present and more grateful. So I had a decision because there was an expectation that I would go into the business to lead our North American expansion, and decided to actually step back and become a stay-at-home dad, a primary caregiver to my children. And oh boy, did I not realize what I was letting myself in for. Suddenly having toddlers who are 3 and 1 running rings around you on a regular basis, most effective learning and development training course I've ever been on. The mental load of looking after 2 toddlers, very quickly learned that. And just how undervalued caregiving is in the UK suddenly hit me like a brick
mm,
wall in the face. But it was that attempt to go and get some respite and have a brew and talk to some other adults that sent me off to my local baby and toddler group. And I did walk in that room and very quickly realised I was the only man there. I went and sat down with that discomfort. But as you said, Laura, that was really the start of something because I just sat there and listened. And it just started to dawn on me week after week that every single woman's got a story here. Every single woman's been through something, whether it's maternity discrimination, health invalidation, sexual harassment, being managed out, being underestimated. And I just felt the fundamental unfairness that kind of sits within me as a person. I've
mm.
always been and had a pillar of social justice and always been quite outspoken about what I think is not fair. That gets you into lots of trouble when you're young. Also, some fascinating conversations. But it did have me reflect on the fact that I wasn't happy that I was meeting all these amazing women and they felt safe enough to share
Mm.
all this terrible stuff that was happening. And I was just like, it's just wrong. Like, it shouldn't be like this. And the truth is, the more they shared, the more I started to see other inequity in society because I started to walk around with a different lens as well because they widened my own perspective too.
Yeah.
And it did leave me thinking, well, what can I actually do to make a difference? And I had to kind of eat a bit of humble pie and realize I didn't know. I didn't actually know what I could do. And that meant I continued listening. I started to challenge some of my own thinking. I started to reflect back on the things that influenced my perspective on the world, the things that shaped my kind of filter, things I didn't see, and things I did see. And then I started doing my masters in the evenings, looking at the psychology of environments and interactions. And 2 modules were focused on gender within that. Suddenly, I had a bit of an evidence base and a reason to start doing some research. And all of a sudden, I'm interviewing women on their lived experiences, then interviewing men to find out what their perceived women's experiences were like in different sectors, then being able to see how big the gap was, what the blind spots were, and just starting to realize that for a lot of men, despite, potentially being surrounded by women, they've never really got a good grasp of what it's like to navigate the world as a woman, especially in the workplace.
Mm.
It's very much kind of centered on their experience. And that's just how things have been built. Because there was a
Yeah.
point where women were kicked out of the workplace. They came into the workplace during the war and prior times, and quite often have been either kicked out or subjected to certain roles. And even today, I still have faced barriers and resistance and friction in certain systems. That is just a legacy of how things have been. So as I started to see that more, I started to think what I could do. I started to equip myself with some skills to do that. But I actually started to realize those skills benefited me as a man as well. And it got me increasingly passionate about allyship as a skill set to build, not as this identity to assume, not as this ideology to believe, but as a set of skills that would widen my perspective on the world, help me see risk earlier, help me
Mm.
notice opportunities closer to home and things that I could have an influence on, help me work across difference, help me be a more effective leader to people who were different than I was, help me to actually bring different people together to work together more effectively. And all of a sudden, I just started to engage more and more men to see, well, why are you not enjoying the benefits of this skill, going on that journey, testing yourself, learning about things you'd not really considered? Why are you not curious like a 7-year-old? Because it's really fun when you are. So that was kind of the journey. And obviously, during that time, I got distracted by things like went off tackling the UK's gender health gap for a few years, as you do when you decide that, we've got the worst health gap out of G20 nations and no one seems bothered, but actually we should be embarrassed. Before coming back and realizing that actually, as so often as one of the few men in these spaces, where are the other men? What's stopping them stepping in?
Yeah.
What motivates them to do so? What drives them to keep going when it gets uncomfortable? What benefits of men who have stepped in ended up getting that they didn't perceive before they started? What myths and misconceptions do men hold? And how do we fundamentally start to close gender gaps so people stop falling in? And how
Mm.
do we actually get, especially men, women, and people from different genders together to actually explore what each of us experiences are like without judgment or comparison, but actually with curiosity and an ability to build bridges and actually see both the commonalities, because there are lots, so many more than we realize, but also how those differences are powerful when we work together and how the root cause of lots of challenges that people face are actually caused by the same roots. We
Yeah.
just combine tools to tackle those things. We'd have workplaces where everyone could perform, everyone had somewhere to belong, and everyone could reach their
Mm.
potential. What a wonderful world that would be.
Wouldn't it just? Also, as well, I want to say though, firstly, you went to those what are typically called mother and baby classes. They're even called that often, aren't they?
Hmm.
The fact that you even went in the first place is fantastic. The fact that you went, you sat in the discomfort, you didn't just leave and or not go back 'cause you're like, well, I'm the only man there, so I'm not going to stay. I don't know if I've got a place here. I don't know if it's relevant, etc. You went back, you sat in the discomfort, and you listened. And wouldn't the world be in a better place if people just sat in the discomfort and listened and genuinely listened without an agenda? And thank you for doing that. Thank you for taking that moment because I think that's where the lessons really hit home when you genuinely listen to what's going on in the world. And ultimately, you're doing something about it, which is just incredible. And I loved what you said about allyship is a skill to build. It's not an ideology to believe. And I think that is such a massive reframe. What are we getting wrong in the world of allyship? Like, what are you talked about misconceptions in your answer? What are some of those misconceptions? Like, what can we be doing? How, like, help us?
Yeah, so I think some of the biggest misconceptions are this idea that allyship is all about supporting other groups of people, giving them a leg up,
Mm.
helping them. And the truth is, that plays a small part within it, but it's not all that allyship is. And it misses the fact that allyship is a universal skill set, so everyone can build it. And actually, it's reciprocal. People who
Mm.
ally to others open themselves up to being allied to themselves. So there's a reciprocal nature, and in building the skills is beneficial to the individual who builds the skills, as well as individuals who are impacted by the systems that they change and the way they turn up and show up in the world around them, and
Yeah.
those small inclusive behaviours that they show. So actually, it's beneficial to everyone, but sadly, it's quite often labelled as one directional help, which makes
Mm.
people feel that in this world that's pretty unpredictable, quite scarce at times, and quite complex, that actually they're going to be at a disadvantage if they be an ally. But actually, 97% of men who we surveyed said just building these skills has made them a better leader or a better human. So it's really deeply beneficial as a skill set. The other things with allyship, this idea that it's all about kind of turning up and being in the room and massive, big moments of change, when actually it's all about the little ripples, the tiny
Mm.
little actions you take to be a bit more intentionally inclusive in how you welcome someone, how you work with someone, how you show up in a meeting, where you just have that little thought, where you actually listen to someone without interrupting them, where you actually just think, oh, I'm not sure about their culture, but I'm going to go and do a bit of research so I can,
Mm.
find a way to broach that conversation in a way that's kind of not expecting them to do all the legwork of teaching me. There are so many different aspects to it, but I just feel that, sitting in that discomfort is part of allyship.
Yeah.
The power with discomfort is it makes you listen properly. If you are comfortable, you don't listen very well. It's really hard to actively listen when you're comfortable
Yeah.
because that comfort means that you're not really activated and you will probably just drift off or start listening to reply, or you might even be switching your own brain at that point for a comparative experience. So I can say, oh, I've been through that as well. When you're uncomfortable, it makes you actively listen
Mm.
because you're having to learn and you're having to therefore listen properly and try and pick up things and question yourself. So actually, when you're uncomfortable, it makes you listen more. And that's the thing where you say, it'd be really powerful if more people sat in discomfort because it
Yeah.
helped me get better at listening. Because
Mm.
I was not very good at listening. I am a sparky idea kind of person where stuff's flowing through my head all the time. So the idea of sat there listening and giving it that space is actually very, very difficult as a skill for me. But that
Mm.
discomfort made me slow down and listen. So actually utilizing discomfort as a tool to get better at listening is actually something that I advise people to do because when you become more aware, because
Yeah.
you are uncomfortable. You feel it embodied in certain ways, potentially in your stomach or a tension in your shoulders or just the heightened cognitive state you end up in because you feel that discomfort. And obviously that's built into us because at one point discomfort was a signal to actually do something,
Yeah.
take some action, as we've always been prey on this planet. We've never been predators. So it's built into our evolved systems to
Yeah.
become more switched on when we get uncomfortable or get a bit more on edge. Utilize that to be more effective at listening. So much I could say around, the things I hear every day, but a lot of it is this really kind of binary narrative of winners and losers, or
Mm.
allies being about identities, i.e., good people are allies and bad people are not allies, and it's just not true. Everyone's on a journey with it. It's a skill set everyone can build. Building it benefits everyone. And
Yeah.
actually, fundamentally, it's really, really useful set of skills for this world that isn't getting more simple. It's not getting more predictable. And it's not
No.
getting any more kind of, well, it's just going to become more volatile. And whether that's economically, technologically, geopolitically, socially, why wouldn't you build a set of skills that's going to help you navigate the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with that more. So, as part of your organization, you actually take allyship into organizations and you're encouraging men in inclusion, in building allyship skill sets. Can you talk us through what a typical engagement with an organization would look like? Like, how do you go into organizations and help them with this? Where do you start? What does it look like? Like, what could people expect if they were going to go through something like this? How does it actually practically work?
Yeah, so all our work is bespoke because what's really important is that this message lands, it feels relevant to
Mm.
individuals, it considers where an organization's at in its maturity journey around these topics, and it thinks about the environments that people work within. Because this can look different if you're on an offshore rig, if you're in a depot, if you're in an office, if you're in a traveling team, if you're in a global organization across cultures, depending on what level of management or leadership you're in. You have different access to systems to make systemic change. You have different impacts across teams. But the truth is, everyone can benefit from these skills, whether you are literally a graduate apprentice starting your journey or, you're a seasoned leader coming towards the end of your career. What does it look like? I can give some conceptual ideas based on clients that we've worked with, but it might quite often start with something that embraces the whole organization to actually kind of give a concept and a bit of tangibility to what allyship is,
Yeah.
because the concept is still fairly misunderstood by lots of people. An ability to get a message around what it is and highlight those benefits, but also those barriers and how we can move beyond them, what motivates and what drives these behaviors, what the myths and misconceptions are. So sometimes that's done through masterclasses, fireside chats, keynotes, and there can be at industry conferences, inter company events. We do a lot of workshops because a big part of this work is actually not looking at allyship on its own, but actually looking at an organizational challenge. So it might be kind of workshopping gender bias in recruitment or promotion or project allocation processes. It might be realizing that there's a gender gap in a certain area and looking, what's impacting that. So there's a consultancy part, might be culture, might be behaviors, might be systems, might be processes. Obviously, almost all our work isn't gender exclusive. So we have both men and women in the room because remember, this is a universal skill set and everyone can benefit from building these skills. Sometimes it is consultancy around engaging more men, supporting gender networks to get more men in, build male pillars, evolve for a future where it's important for women to have that safe space, but it's also important to take the essence of that and get it, partnered with to drive forward to actually make some organizational change as well. And I suppose that we do quite a bit of research understanding still to this day men's and women's lived experience across different industries to continue to see where those gaps are. We do have our National Allyship Summit in May at the BBC with the theme from gender division to gender dialogue. And we will be having an afternoon of creating a national conversation around what's working to close gender gaps, honesty around what's not, and what are we going to do next? What lessons can we get from the 15 different industries that are in the room? How can we actually advance this as a national conversation going forward to create more cohesion across the whole gender landscape, but also really think about how we start collectively building these skills, which will make our nation a better nation if everyone was able to work together more effectively. There's a lot I can say about the things that we do, but it is really impactful. It does often get people coming up at the end saying, I'd never really heard inclusion framed like that. I'd never really thought about this work in that way. I actually now see why I would engage in it, but no one had ever suggested that it could be done like this. And, a lot of feedback around, I thought it was going to be preachy and it's just made me curious and made me think. So some really interesting feedback around how it's different than some of the work that's out there, but it definitely leaves a legacy, creates conversations, creates a pathway, and gets people thinking about how they start to build these skills. Because we have a whole skill building pathway, we have a whole maturity model for looking at how you gradually go on that journey. And obviously we work, to create sustainability. We do train the trainers for small groups to keep kind of pulsing this in the company. So yeah, there's a lot we can do, really enjoyable, and working across 13 different sectors. We've learned an awful lot about how we apply this in different environments.
Yeah, just incredible. What would you say to the critics and the skeptics about allyship and why it's important? What are the values, the benefits? Like, how would you convince a skeptic that allyship is important?
Well, it's really funny, Laura, because 10 years ago when I first came across the word, I didn't like it. I actually felt it sounded very combative, very good guys versus bad guys, felt very militaristic and felt very conflict orientated. And while some conflict can be healthy, it didn't really describe my feeling of wanting to bring people together, create more solidarity and unity and combining people's difference to make things more effective. So I was like, no, I'm not using that word. Now, obviously, there's an aspect of it's in the name of my business. So what changed? What changed is that I came across the original meaning of the word, the root of it, from the old French word allier. And allier actually means to combine, to unite, and to bring things together. So I was like, how can we bring that ancient meaning and bring it into the modern world? So what would I say to skeptics? For the many men that I've interviewed who've gone on this journey, and to the many men that I've sat with who think inclusion is a lot of rubbish, a lot of what nonsense, and it excludes men, doesn't care about us, and it's just another thing I have to do when everything else is stacked against me already. What's really interesting is speaking to and listening to these men. Firstly, lots of these men have stuff going on in their own lives. They're not actually frustrated about inclusion. They're frustrated about something that's impacting them personally. That might be debt, relationships, health, finances, workplace, ageism, you name it. They're usually going through something, but they haven't necessarily been listened to. And that's why they come across as so frustrated towards this. We go there and listen and find out what sits behind it. And it is fascinating that actually there are not that many people who were against fairness when you actually strip it all back. But I think secondly, and many men have shared this when we've done our benefits research, is that you don't really know how beneficial this is until you do it. And
Yeah.
actually, it can be really hard to get people to do something when they can't see the benefits in the moment. It
Mm.
only looks like they're going to lose out. And that scarcity again, that fear of getting things wrong, it's understandable, but it's about how we collectively create the safety for people to move beyond that. And it's really
Yeah.
fascinating because obviously, when we talk to men about benefits, some have talked about benefits to them. I'm more self aware, I'm more assured, I'm less scared of getting things wrong. Don't feel like I need to win or have the answer all the time. And that's taken the pressure off me. I'm more forgiving and compassionate to myself. I just understand the world more. I see things more quickly. I feel more confident in making decisions. Some men reference how it's impacted how they lead and interact with other people. They're now more confident in having those crunchy, challenging conversations. They
Mm.
don't shy away from them or kind of shy away from conflicts in the same way. They're seeing members on the team thrive and getting real fulfillment and joy from that, and didn't really think they would, but now they're seeing that, and actually it's making them really enjoy going to work. Some men have seen the ability for teams to come together and output to become better and more cohesion across different functions because of the utilization of these skills, and have actually seen how it's benefited them as a department and the people around them. And then some men have been a bit more commercial in their benefits. They said I've become better at handling objections and closing sales because I can just navigate different stakeholders more
Yeah.
effectively. Some people have been like, it's been easier to bring diverse project teams together. Now winning more bids. I'm billing higher. I'm happy. So it's fascinating to see because different men are reporting different benefits. But if there is one thing that's pretty universal, they've all said that it's made them more effective at what they do. And that in itself, most men, if you could give them something and say, with a bit of work, you'll be better at what you do, most men would bite your hand off. So actually, it's not about giving stuff away. It's about getting better at what you do. And you'll be deeply surprised by the benefits if you're willing to go on the journey, put a bit of effort in, get a bit uncomfortable, and be willing to listen and learn.
Yeah, I love that. That's so fantastic. What is your biggest personal frustration with this space? Like, what really keeps you awake at night that drives you into these spaces and these conversations?
Oh, geez. Oh, Laura.
Do
I
we
mean,
need another hour?
I think that's an episode in itself. Let me just ream them off very quickly. The
Please.
first one, people using privilege in a binary way, as in you're privileged, you're not privileged. It's just
Mm.
unhelpful, splits people up. Let's explore privilege in a way that doesn't put people in one camp or the other. In the same way, allies as good guys and bad guys. It's not binary. Lots of amazing men, great values, great people, lovely, lovely people who want to be helpful. It's just they've not always got the skill set to do so. And sometimes they don't always know why they would do. And obviously, in this kind of polarized world, there can be that bit of fear. We need that balance between agency and safety.
Mm.
And that requires a little bit of nuance from both sides. I hate to say it, but some very exclusive inclusion work over the past 5 years. We all know that if you bat people around the back of the head with a baseball bat and tell them they've done bad, they're not going to suddenly do good. They're going to make it look like they're doing good, but they're not actually going to do it. They're not going to do the work.
Mm.
They're just going to
Yeah.
try and stay out of trouble. And this shouldn't be staying out of trouble. This should be actually building skills and making a difference to yourself and people around you. So obviously, I'm very much for strengths-based, skill-based work, not deficit-based work. And I think it's really important how we land those messages. Other frustration are there's not enough men who are active in the space. Like,
Yeah.
there needs to be more men who are active because that also means that then they're part of designing what inclusion can be for the future. So there is both sides of it. Basically, everything in our space is a balance. We can be honest about the reality for women, but also need to appreciate that men are facing some challenges too.
Yeah.
And you find that balance because the root cause of those is quite similar at the end of the day.
Mm.
But we can't just suddenly just default to, oh, well, yeah, men are struggling without considering significant barriers that still exist for women. But people really struggle to hold two truths at the same time.
Yeah.
And humans love to be in this binary of one is good, one is
Mhm.
bad. And it's just not true. So much of our work is how do we build bridges in a world where people are chucking bombs at each other. And the work is bridge building, which takes real work. It takes
Yeah.
listening
Mm.
and it takes being active. And those are two kind of ever presence in our work. It requires people to listen and then gradually use that listening to learn and take some action. In the very essence of what we do, there are people who I would term performative allies, talk all good game on social media, don't do anything to make a difference. Very, very frustrating. Some businesses are like that as well.
Yeah.
There are even allies who exploit people, use it as a good guy facade, and then treat women poorly. And that's also a deep frustration that I have, because they make our work harder. But ultimately, behind the scenes, people know who they are, and people know, are they actually doing the work? And this is crunchy work. It does take a lot of self-work, and it does take some real time to build. But actually, it's massively changed how I navigate the world. And I just want that for other people, because it's given me freedom. It's given me capabilities that I didn't have. It's helped me see the world in such a more colourful way than I could see before. Like, I want other men to have this gift, and that's what drives me to do the work that I do with men, also the work with boys in schools, and also the work to bring men and women and boys and girls together to explore this in a way that's all about curiosity and not about judgment.
Oh, fantastic. Oh my gosh. I feel like we need a whole other podcast just on that topic and just on that question. We're going to have podcast part 2, Lee, because we are very quickly running out of time, which I'm so sad about. I feel like we're only just scratching the surface. I will ask you my final question that we asked to all our guests. So we call our guests wave makers because they're making waves on the world, on industries, on careers, on businesses, on people's lives. And that is absolutely true of the work that you are doing in male allyship. So thank you deeply for that. What advice would you give to our other aspiring wave makers? And do you know what? I'm going to add something to my usual question for you is, what advice would you give to the men out there who want to be an ally and don't know where to start?
So the thing about wave makers is waves are big, and people feel that it needs to be big grand gestures, big tidal waves, tsunamis of change, the big things, when actually every single wave starts with ripples. So it actually starts with really small, tiny things. My little bit of advice is that fundamentally, it starts with just listening to other people. It starts with getting to know other people a bit more. It starts with realizing that there are plenty of resources to upskill yourself on other people's experiences, podcasts, this one, TED Talks, books. But more importantly, my biggest thing is to take yourself out of your personal algorithm to experience the world in someone else's. And you will just find a completely different lens on the world that you'd probably not explored. Do that with curiosity, and all of a sudden you'll get pulled into this journey just because you're a human. The most powerful thing for us to do now is to actually step outside the world that's been curated for us and go on a journey. Imagine yourself as a pirate of the modern day. You're literally sailing out to the sea, no idea where you'll dock for land again. Might be on the other side of the world, but actually, there's so much fun in being an adventurer and a pirate. Why don't we just embrace that and become modern day pirates together?
I love that. Let's be modern day pirates. Oh, fantastic. Lee Chambers, thank you so much for your time today. It's been such an incredibly honest, heartfelt, deeply human story, from young days as an entrepreneur to going through such mental and physical devastation and coming out the other side with a vision to take your first steps again with your daughter, to creating an organization centered on male allyship and equality is just such an incredibly beautiful thing. So thank you for sitting in those mum and baby classes. Thank you for listening in the discomfort and creating such an incredible organization, the work that you do and the movement you're creating. The deepest thanks from me, because I think if there are more Lee Chambers in the world would be a better place. So the deepest thanks for the work that you're doing, but also for your time today.
That was wonderful.
Thank you everyone for listening and for YouTube watching. And if you're looking to elevate the human storytelling of your brand, please get in touch with the Ripple Impact so we can take your storytelling into brand growth. Please reach out to the male allies to see the incredible work that they're doing and how you can take that into your organization. That is a wrap on this Ripple episode. Tune in weekly for more bold voices and inspiring wavemaker guests just like Lee. I'm Laura Barber. This is the Ripple Impact. We will see you all next week. Lee, thank you so much for your time. Bye for now, everyone.